So assess the extent to which business cycles are caused by changes in investment. By the way, just to break down again one more time, your assessment objective one and assessment objective two collectively are graded for 14 marks, and your evaluation, which is your assessment objective three, is graded for 6 marks. Your answer is in levels. Your level one will include the basic definitions. Your level two and level three will be about how investment and investment theories can cause business cycles to fluctuate. And your level three के अंदर it will be about what can cause the business cycle to really go up and go down, जो multiplier effect का concept होता है. And then in the end, for evaluation, we have to write about how investments may not cause business cycles, and maybe there are other things which causes business cycles to move. And investment is not the only thing. ठीक. बैम्फर्ड के अंदर उसने बड़ा अच्छे से इसको पूरा डिस्कस किया हुआ है. ठीक है. So I'll write like a business cycle.
Sir,
Yeah.
do you have your like written notes like PDF so I can like print it out?
I would rather recommend कि तुम उसको यूज करो, बैम्फर्ड को. That's a better
Okay.
thing to do. Although बैम्फर्ड का ही एक वर्जन है मेरे पास, basically just taken out, not cluttered. I can send you that. Honestly, whichever ones you have, you can use those. Pamphlets अच्छा कुछ भी नहीं है. It's the best thing
Okay.
that
Have you
you
sent the
have it.
pamphlet?
It's on the drive. You can
Okay.
use the drive.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So a business cycle shows how the real GDP can grow in a country. Sometimes it grows faster than expected, and sometimes it grows slower. Okay. Um, it shows the fluctuation of actual growth in comparison to potential growth. So if I was to like draw and show, so this is what I would do for this. जो हमारा बनता है, something like this, and then you can show that this is the potential GDP, and with the passage of time, your GDP has cyclical moves, and that's your actual GDP. And to explain, we say कि भाई there are 4 phases to it. ठीक है. Uh, there are 4 phases. कौन से phases हैं? One is this one, जिसको आप पीक कहते हैं. देन देयर इज दिस वन जिसको आप डाउन टर्न कहते हैं. देयर इज दिस वन जिसको, एंड नाउ दीज आर द टर्मिनोलॉजीज जो बैम्फर्ड में यूज हुई भी हैं. ऑनेस्टली दे आर डिफरेंट. आप डिफरेंट जगहों पे ट्रेड साइकिल या इकोनॉमिक साइकिल या बिजनेस साइकिल सर्च करें and you'll find that there are different terminologies that they use. मैं वो भी mention कर दूंगा, but I would like to stick to the Bamford's terminologies mainly because that, you know, he's there in the, sometimes he's there in the meetings and all. And AS के अंदर तो हमने literally copy paste देखा है from his book in the marking scheme. और A2 के अंदर भी like this particular question जो है, it's been dealt with very nicely in Bamford also, like बिल्कुल headings and paragraphs के साथ. So it's a good book. You should uh, use it. Now जब हम हमारी बात होती है business cycle की, तो we would want to mention that what each cycle represents. Like for example, if I talk about peak, not too much details, but we can mention like peak जो होता है that talks about the expansion in economy is growing at a faster rate. Uh, ठीक है. Incomes are rising, incomes rising. और क्या हो रहा है? Confidence of both individuals and firms is on the higher side. So confidence is higher. और जब confidence higher होता है तो we know that in the economy the spending is going up also, you know, and lending by banks is higher. Risky projects are being taken, and also known as like the boom. Economy is going through a boom cycle. All right. So इतना detail काफी है इसके अंदर. Don't want to spend too much time on this. आगे और भी बहुत सारी चीजें बात करनी है. ओ सॉरी, am I writing? ये पीक नहीं है. पीक में तो everything is exhausted and to the top. This is upturn. Sorry, apologies. This is upturn. बिकॉज पीक के ऊपर तो अब ग्रोइंग रेट जो होता है आपका, जो स्पीड होती है, दैट्स एक्चुअली स्लोइंग डाउन. यूर ऑलमोस्ट लाइक रीचिंग द टॉप वाला पार्ट. तो ग्रोथ जो है वो ऑलमोस्ट कंसोलिडेट हो चुकी होती है. और उस पॉइंट के ऊपर, पीक के टाइम के ऊपर, इफ यू टॉक अबाउट द आउटपुट गैप्स इज पॉजिटिव. What I mean is output gap is positive कि actual versus potential के अंदर there is the greatest distance. You have like a large distance between um, actual and potential GDP. बट पीक के पॉइंट के ऊपर वी हैव टू रिमेम्बर. देखो पीक के बाद क्या होता है, ड्रॉप आना शुरू हो जाता है. पीक के टाइम व्हाट वी हैव टू रिमेम्बर, टू मेजर थिंग इज, इसको बाय द वे हम इन्फ्लेशनरी गैप भी कहते हैं. तो इन्फ्लेशन इज हाई एंड एक हम एएस में पढ़ते थे बैलेंस ऑफ पेमेंट. वी मोस्टली फोकस्ड ऑन करंट अकाउंट, but majorly the whole balance of payment difficulty starts to come in. Because when things are doing great, you are using plenty of resources. You're importing a lot of goods and services, right? And so uski wajah se your exports are not much, but your imports really increase a lot. So it starts putting pressure on your reserve positions, and then the government has to somehow like manage the inflation. Because remember, inflation, very high inflation is not good. फिर पीक के बाद इकोनॉमी का साइकिल टर्न होता है. सो रिमेंबर दिस इज सॉर्ट ऑफ लाइक अ लाइफ लेसन वी कैन से कि ये जो बिजनेस साइकिल है ये इकोनॉमिक लाइफ लेसन है. दैट after every peak there is a downturn and probably a trough, and then after every trough there is an upturn, there is an upside. It's not that कि हमेशा बस क्या होगा कि जब प्रॉब्लम क्या होती है, when you're in a downturn people feel that we're never going to get out of this, but then the good time comes economically. And then when you're at the peak, when you're thinking that this party is never going to end, and that's when the downturn comes, right? तो ये इस तरीके से हमारी sort of चलती है इकोनॉमी. ऐसे पॉइंट के ऊपर ऑब्वियसली वी नो दैट जो आपका इकोनॉमिक ग्रोथ रेट है दैट स्टार्ट्स टू गो डाउन, एंड समटाइम्स negative is also positive. Negative, sorry, negative economic growth can also happen, which is कि आपकी एक्चुअली जीडीपी गिरना शुरू हो जाती है. और उस दौरान फिर your unemployment is obviously going up, your economy is sort of like going into trouble. इकोनॉमी के अंदर इन्वेस्टमेंट is going down, confidence, both consumers and producers, people are saving more, spending less. Businesses are also saving more, investing less. So overall unemployment happens and your economic cycle sort of goes bad. And then lastly, uh, we go through the cycle in terms of trough. ये basically आप कहते हैं this is like the lowest point. Okay. इस lowest point के अंदर what we realize is कि aggregate demand is at its lowest. इसको हम recession का नाम भी देते हैं जब इकोनॉमी बिल्कुल ही नीचे गिर जाती है, and we tend to have a negative output गैप. हमारे साइकिल के अंदर भी हम देखते हैं, इसको आप रिसेशनरी गैप कहते हैं, डिफ्लेशनरी गैप कहते हैं. इन सम प्लेसेस वी इवन कॉल इट डिप्रेशन. रिसेशन और डिप्रेशन में फर्क है, बाय द वे. हम ओ लेवल में रिसेशन और डिप्रेशन में फर्क क्रिएट करते हैं. बेसिकली अ रिसेशन इज व्हेन यू हैव 2 quarters of a falling economic growth rate. 2 quarters मतलब half a year. ठीक है, अगर half a year आपका economic growth rate is going from 5 to 4 to 3 to 2 to 1, sometimes even negative, but as long as it's falling for 2 consecutive quarters, we say economy has entered into a recession. फिर डिप्रेशन इज जब आपका ये डाउन साइकिल जो है इट जस्ट stays there for longer period of time, तो वी से कि इकोनॉमी जो है वो डिप्रेशन के अंदर चली गई है, which is definitely not a very good place to be in because it creates a lot of problem in the economies and all. ठीक हो गया. तो ये आपका बिजनेस साइकिल का एक मैंने ब्रीफ दिया है. वी डोंट वांट टू स्पेंड टू मच टाइम. अगर ये जो मैंने अभी तक लिखा है, you should not spend more than say 5 minutes on explaining this business cycle. If you do it in really good details, level one, 3 marks I can give you on that, but it's up to the examiner, honestly. ठीक है. But then in our explanation it's a must कि हम investment को भी explain करें कि what do we mean by investment. ठीक. So we want to define that. Investment होती क्या है? So far we've seen investment in that formula of ours, C plus I plus G plus X minus M. ठीक. तो ये जो investment होती है from the firms, it is basically spending on capital goods, जिसके अंदर हम एग्जाम्पल के अंदर लिख सकते हैं इट्स अबाउट मशीनरीज एंड फैक्ट्रीज एंड इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर एंड इन फिजिकल इन्वेंट्री. ये भी जगहों के ऊपर हम लिखते हैं फिजिकल इन्वेंट्री मीनिंग अगर कोक है तो कोक एक तरफ जो है फिक्स कैपिटल फॉर्मेशन कर सकता है और नई मशीन्स लगा सकता है, टेक रिलेटेड फैक्ट्रीज बना सकता है एंड ऑल. but दूसरे एंड के ऊपर they can build up their inventory of bottles of coke and they can sell it in the future and make money, right? So ये obviously उसका part है. uh, जहां तक बात है इन्वेस्टमेंट की, it is one of the component in aggregate demand, and it influences the long run aggregate supply. मैं बड़ा briefly इस बात को कर रहा हूँ because I need to move into the essays. यानी LRAS को इंक्रीज करेगा तो पोटेंशियल भी राइज करेगी. So this is what I'm talking about. When a firm invests in having more machines and all, तो उससे क्या होता है, एडी बढ़ता है, एग्रीगेट डिमांड शिफ्ट टू द राइट, बिकॉज सीमेंट, स्टील, मशीन सबकी डिमांड बढ़ती है. फिर उसके बाद what happens is that that firm has now built up a factory. Now it has a potential increase that they can produce more goods and services in the future. तो वो फिर आउटवर्ड शिफ्ट होता है. So that's how I can explain investment. बाकी तुम्हारी मर्जी है how else you want to do that. We move into analysis. So your 5 marks is consolidated over here. Here you can move into your second part, which is analysis, that how investment और business cycles का कोई link होना चाहिए. तो उस link को बनाने के लिए we must talk about, अगर कहीं पे भी कोई ऐसा क्वेश्चन आ जाए ना, कहीं पे भी, दिस इज फॉर ऑल, कि क्योंकि हमने जब ये नेशनल इनकम का चैप्टर पढ़ा तो हमने देखा देयर आर सर्टेन इंजेक्शंस इन द इकोनॉमी. इट इज इन्वेस्टमेंट, इट इज गवर्नमेंट स्पेंडिंग एंड इट इज एक्सपोर्ट्स. देयर आर ऑल सॉर्ट्स ऑफ इंजेक्शंस इन द इकोनॉमी. तो क्वेश्चन किसी भी हिसाब से आ सकता है. सो इफ देर इज एन इंजेक्शन, इट विल हैव एन इम्पैक्ट. अभी यहाँ पे इन्होंने बिजनेस साइकिल का टर्म यूज किया है, but business cycle का term is an excuse to talk about the real output, because remember the business cycle talks about the changes in the real output. तो फिर अगर इन्वेस्टमेंट का रियल आउटपुट पे इम्पैक्ट हम कर रहे हैं, तो दैट मीन्स वो जो हमने पूरा एक मल्टीप्लायर का कॉन्सेप्ट पढ़ा है, दैट नीड्स टू बी डिस्कस्ड ओवर हियर. So this is what I'll do then in for my analysis analysis के लिए. So I'll say like changes in investment can influence the business cycle, and it could be with multiplier effect. Okay, so when we're talking about multiplier, थोड़ा सा इसको और हमें बताना पड़ेगा, what do we mean by this multiplier. So I'll do it like this, that when investment increases, aggregate demand increases, leading to higher output कह लो, income कह लो, and employment. The initial increase in income leads to further rounds of consumption spending depending on the size of multiplier, right? So this is what I'm saying, कि जब आप इनिशियल पहली इन्वेस्टमेंट करते हैं तो पीपल अर्न मनी फ्रॉम इट. इफ आई इन्वेस्टेड 100 million in my factory, I've invested So I must have bought machines and cements and paid workers for it, and maybe बिजली की payments की होंगी. So I must have spent that 100 million for these things. That's my first round of spending, और वो GDP में record हो जाती है. फिर whoever earns that money, right, incomes, then it leads to further rounds of consumption in the economy because everybody who has earned that money, they're going to go and they're going to spend in the economy. And then whoever got that income is going to go and spend into that economy. लेकिन कितना बड़ा impact आएगा depends on the size of the multiplier. So I can then say that the multiplier can be, calculated. तो किस तरीके से calculate होता है multiplier? So this is what I'll say, that multiplier can be calculated using a formula which is k, one multiplier के लिए हम k use करते हैं, divided by uh, 1 minus MPC, or 1 divided by 1 minus marginal propensity to withdrawal, या withdraw. Which basically means depending on आप कितनी सेक्टर की बात कर रहे हैं, तो ये withdraw के अंदर we can have like two sector में, I would just simply say, sorry, not one minus, just simply MPF. So if it's a two sector, if it's a two sector, it is only MPS. If it's a three sector, then there is MPS and MPT. And if it's a four sector, it's MPS, MPT, and MPM. तो फिर ये इस तरह से हम सेक्टर वाइज इसको डिवाइड कर सकते हैं. इट्स अप टू यू, यू कैन जस्ट वर्क. मैंने एक विड्रॉ लिख दिया, दैट बिकम्स अ जनरल, कि दिस इज हाउ इट वर्क्स. अब होता क्या है इकोनॉमी के अंदर, अगर पैसा विड्रॉ हो रहा है, आई दिस इज व्हाट्स हैपनिंग. कोक spends 100 million, and that money goes to all sorts of companies and individuals. Now, the money that they've earned, 100 million as a total, now how much of that will they keep for taxes? Will they pay in taxes? Will they keep as savings? Will they buy imported stuff with it? वो withdrawals हैं. Once those withdrawals are out, all you're left with is how much money you're going to spend. तो हम ये बात करते हैं इस पॉइंट के ऊपर, that if the MPC, marginal propensity to consume, is high, then multiplier will be large, and even a small investment will generate a large increase in income. Okay, but on the other side, we do have to mention this also, that if the investment is taken out, then your national income is going to fall adversely also and create a very large reduction also, right? Don't use the word vice versa. Explain the whole thing, that if investment falls, then large multiplier will reduce incomes by a large amount, और उस हिसाब से आपकी जो पूरी इकोनॉमी की सिवियरिटी है उसके ऊपर उसका इम्पैक्ट आएगा. And now, just to connect this whole thing, so we can suggest that if investment increases, तो आपका जो business cycle है, it will show an upturn, and then when investment falls, so that will show business cycle ka downturn, and then the size of multiplier can affect the size of swing. अब this is what I'm saying कि अगर multiplier आपका बड़ा होगा तो in this diagram of mine the impacts will be much more magnified. लेकिन अगर multiplier छोटा होगा तो it will be much more smaller. So based on the question, I think we've done a reasonably good job by explaining कि क्या क्या इसके अंदर elements हैं. इसमें obviously multiplier के साथ we have made the connection, but that should not be enough. इन्वेस्टमेंट की जब हमने बात की है कि इन्वेस्टमेंट कैन क्रिएट मल्टीप्लायर इफेक्ट्स और क्या चीजें इन्वेस्टमेंट हाउ एल्स इन्वेस्टमेंट कैन अफेक्ट द बिजनेस साइकिल तो इसके अंदर वी टॉक अबाउट द सेकंड थिंग दैट आई थिंक वी शुड ऑलवेज टॉक अबाउट इज हाउ इन्वेस्टमेंट की एक थ्योरी है जिसको हम कहते हैं एक्सेलरेटर थ्योरी. So even the accelerator theory is connected to the business cycle. Okay? How is it connected to the business cycle? तो इसमें हम ये बात कर रहे हैं सबसे पहले तो we're going to explain what accelerator theory is about. Accelerator theory जो है हमारी it is an induced theory. Induced theory का मतलब है that investment is dependent on national income. Okay. And this theory says that if income goes up, investment rises, and if income goes down, then investment falls. ठीक है? So इसका एक फॉर्मूला था I is equals to A times change in Y. I don't think we need to go so much into detail regarding this, but as long अगर मैं ऐसे भी कर रहा हूं तो this is just to explain that how any kind of change in national income will with the capital to output ratio is going to have an impact on investment. So if investment goes up, yeah, if income goes up, investment goes up. If income goes down, then investment is gonna go down also. ठीक है? So this is also then you have to create it to the business cycle. Once you explain this theory, you have to make a connection के how this is related. उसमें भी वही बात है कि अगर if there is a large change in national income, it will create a big swing. Okay. And if there is a small change in national income, it will have a smaller movement in it. तो ये हमारा उसका एक्सप्लेनेशन है तो वो साइकिल्स के साथ आप इसको कंपेयर कर सकते हैं. तो उसकी जो वॉलेटिलिटी है बिजनेस साइकिल्स की वो नेशनल इनकम के ऊपर दिस टाइम we're seeing is dependent. तो फिर हम इन द एंड व्हाट आई कैन से इज के investment with the multiplier and the accelerator can create an impact on the cycles. The bigger the multiplier, the greater the national income, the greater the business cycles की movement. But at the same time, if multiplier is smaller and if investment जो है वो accelerator के हिसाब से there's not much of a change in the national income, it will not create a very large impact on it also. But notice when you're writing analysis, you have to continuously go back to the question and everything that you explain needs to connect. Okay, investment, this is how through this will have the effect on the business cycle. Investment through this is going to have an impact on the business cycle. Lastly, uh, from the evaluation point of view, we obviously have to talk about how investment cannot alone affect the business cycles. Okay. तो उसके अंदर हम क्या बातें करते हैं थोड़ी सी you might want to suggest like the limitations of the accelerator थ्योरी वेयर आप ये बातें लिखते हैं लिमिटेशंस के अंदर, दैट एक्सेलरेटर के अंदर अजम्पशन है दैट वी आर ऑलवेज एट फुल capacity, but in reality, we know that we're not always at full capacity. There's always excess capacity in hand. So, uh, any kind of increase in national income might not result in investment. So it might be thoda sa unrealistic from that point of view. Sometimes, if national income is increasing, businesses do not increase their investment because sometimes businesses wait to see if income rise is permanent, right? तो वो ऐसे ही नहीं इन्वेस्टमेंट कर लेते, sometimes they wait and see. उसी तरह से we want to talk about a little about the multiplier effect also. Okay, multiplier effect, if you remember, it deals with the withdrawals in the economy. How much withdrawals do you have? Leakages भी कहते हैं. तो विड्रॉल्स के अंदर तो टैक्सेशन भी है, सेविंग्स भी है और इंपोर्ट्स भी है. तो इट रियली कैन डिपेंड ऑन all the other aspects like how open the economy is. If the economy is very open, तो उसकी वजह से क्या होगा, आपके इंपोर्ट ज्यादा होंगे तो ऑटोमेटिकली आपका जो मल्टीप्लायर होगा वो छोटा हो जाएगा और उसका जो इम्पैक्ट आएगा ऑन द बिजनेस साइकिल might be very weak, right? So small multiplier means weak impact on the business cycle. So that could be talked about over there. फिर most importantly that needs to be talked over here is कि किस तरह से business cycle can be affected because of other things. So business cycle is affected by other factors. अब उसके अंदर क्या क्या हो सकते हैं? उसके अंदर changes in income. Investment is not the only thing. It could be just changes in income and consumption of people. People's perception about how what the future is like. Maybe they want to save more, spend less. Business cycle gets affected. You have the geopolitics, and we can see right now to sabse zyada geopolitics is dominating. You can have discussions about the financial crises that are happening, wars that are happening, um, that can have an effect on people's decision. Pandemic अभी recently बड़ा जबरदस्त हुआ है जिसके अंदर we've seen कि किस तरीके से impact आ सकता है. ठीक है. साथ ही में also I think one of the most important ones, uh, government fiscal and monetary policy. इसको थोड़ा सा ईच पॉइंट को अगर आप इलेबोरेट कर लें कि हाउ वो बिजनेस साइकिल्स को अफेक्ट कर सकते हैं, फिस्कल एंड मॉनेटरी पॉलिसीज. लाइक आप एक्सपेंशनरी पे जाएंगे, इफ यू गो फॉर एक्सपेंशनरी, national income will rise, but if you go for contractionary, तो फिर उस केस के अंदर आपकी incomes will fall, or from the cycle's point of view, the cycle will rise in this case and the cycle will fall in this case. So somewhere along this line, the discussion will be, and so then you can give like your overall judgment after making the counter also that in conclusion, changes in investment are a major cause, by the way, or it's one of the most volatile also, by the way, क्योंकि investment जैसे कंजम्पशन होती है, कंजम्पशन वी नो दैट पीपल्स कंजम्पशन इज नॉट गोइंग टू चेंज सो मच बिकॉज पीपल हैव टू स्पेंड ऑन टू सर्वाइव. बस बिजनेसेस के लिए इन्वेस्टमेंट इज प्योरली डिसीजंस बेस्ड ऑन प्रॉफिटेबिलिटी एंड व्हाट द फ्यूचर इज लाइक. तो इसी वजह से हम बोलते हैं दिस इज वेरी वॉलेटाइल. Uh, and obviously, volatility comes with the multiplier and the accelerator effects, which can magnify economic fluctuations. However, investment is not the sole cause. The strength of the impact depends on the leakages in the economy and the structure of the economy, जिसके अंदर, how open your economy is, how the government decision making is. So इस तरह से आप close करेंगे that investment is not the only factor which is going to have an impact on the business cycle. So somewhere along that line, this is how you're supposed to kind of write an essay on this one. इसी तरह, um, we do have other questions. Bamford के अंदर एक question था. um, Let me just bring it on the side to show you. Similar concept. An economy experiences a rise in consumer spending. So based on what we've just done, there's a rise in consumer spending. So now we're thinking, जो rise आया है consumer spending में, is it definitely it impacts the MPC ना, क्योंकि income का, if there is a rise in consumer spending, so for every portion of the income, the consumption portion is rising. That means your withdrawals हैं, savings, taxes, imports, इनको collectively there must be a reduction. That's why people are able to consume more. और अभी हमने पीछे देखा कि कंजम्पशन अगर ज्यादा होती है ना, तो आपका मल्टीप्लायर का साइज ग्रो कर जाता है, और जब मल्टीप्लायर का साइज ग्रो करता है, तो एनी काइंड ऑफ इंजेक्शन IGX creates a much larger effect. So based on that, an economy experiences a rise in consumer spending. Evaluate the extent to which the final impact on national income depends on the size of the multiplier. So mainly your first part, the first 14 marks, is about explanation of multiplier, uske formulas in maybe like a 2, 3, 4 sector. Uh, Explanation of if the multiplier number is big, what does that mean? If the multiplier value is small, then what does that mean? What are the things that affects the size of the multiplier? And then counter के अंदर we want to suggest कि ये national income पे जो overall impact आता है, is multiplier the only thing which is going to have an impact on that? Could there be something else which can have an impact on it? ठीक, so somewhere along that line, this question needs to be done. Um, if I show you this, what they have suggested as an outline. First, एक सिंपल सा लिंक दे वांट टू नो कि कंज्यूमर स्पेंडिंग बढ़ने से होगा क्या. वी नो कंज्यूमर स्पेंडिंग बढ़ने से एग्रीगेट डिमांड बढ़ता है, एग्रीगेट एक्सपेंडिचर बढ़ता है, और उसका मल्टीप्लायर के ऊपर किस तरीके से इम्पैक्ट आएगा, इसमें इन्होंने कुछ मेंशन नहीं किया हुआ कि फॉर्मूलाज वगैरह लिखने एंड ऑल ऑफ दैट, बट दैट नीड्स टू बी डन, जो मैंने अभी पीछे लिखा है. ठीक है. If you want to give an example, you can give an example of that, and you can prove that कि किस तरीके से multiplier का size will be. ठीक है. So they say a rise in consumer spending will lead to a rise in aggregate expenditure. The multiplier is the extent of the final change in national income. यहाँ पे I think we should do the formulas, and we should do the even that formula that when there is an injection in the economy, that injection goes through the multiplier effect and creates an impact on the national income. That's what the connection here is. So if MPC is rising, then the multiplier will get bigger, and there will be a greater increase in the national income. ठीक है. The size of the multiplier will depend on the leakages in the economy. अगर आपकी savings, taxes, imports बढ़ेगा, तो आपका multiplier का value छोटा हो जाएगा, और उसकी वजह से smaller impact create होगा. through example, they want you to do a basic calculation and show कि $1 का कितना हिस्सा आप सेव करते हैं, टैक्स करते हैं, इंपोर्ट करते हैं, कंज्यूम करते हैं, मल्टीप्लायर निकाल लें और फिर उसको दिखा दें कि हाउ बिग ऑफ एन इम्पैक्ट इट्स गोइंग टू ब्रिंग. So overall, rising consumption can create a big impact on the national income, but it depends on the multiplier. Multiplier depends on a lot more things. तो इस तरीके से कुछ इसका स्ट्रक्चर होने की जरूरत है.